Hi everyone, and welcome to this video with me, Sammy, from AIMSF Sounds. In this video I want to talk a little bit about the MPC Live. Now, I want to do a show and tell, walk through the features, tell you all about it, but first, this is a video about my impressions, and it's going to assume you have an idea of what the MPC Live is about, and what I'm going to talk about is how well it does what it purports to do. So the way I'm going to do this is I've made a list of positive things that really impressed me, and things that I'd like to see improved. So let's start with the good. The first thing is this start button. As you can see there, because I didn't press down on the start button, it started to turn off. That's kind of a fail-safe feature. The way you turn on the MPC is with a button on the back here. So you can imagine if you're transporting this somewhere and you accidentally hit that button, it's going to turn on your MPC. But having to additionally press and hold the start button to turn it on means that you're not going to accidentally turn on the Live and drain the battery while you're transporting it. So that's a really nice little touch that shows that they've put thought into this machine, and it's obviously just one of many on my list. The other nice thing about that is you can actually go into preferences and turn that off. Okay, so the next nice thing is you can actually customize the start page. So originally when it loaded up, it just showed me these demos. Now I actually get to see my past projects and some templates up here. So the next thing on my list is the stability. So the good news in this case is in the 2 weeks I've had it, I've done about 4 or 5 light projects, and I haven't had any crashes or any glitches or any instability generally. The only thing I've noticed so far is an occasional minor pop sound in the audio, but I think I've only encountered that a handful of times. Apparently some people are having problems getting an SSD to work in here. I just took an SSD right out of my computer and put it into the AKAI and it worked perfectly first time, and there hasn't been a problem since. With the only exception being that when I connect the MPC Live to my DAW and work on a project, and then exit and want to go back to standalone mode, I have to restart the MPC for it to pick up the SSD again. Now that's not to say that's going to be everybody's experience. If you go and do some research, there are actually a lot of people who've had issues. And as you can probably imagine, most people who are happy with the MPC aren't really going on to Facebook user groups or the MPC forums to talk about it. It's really the people that are having issues because they're looking for help, and they're looking to see if other people are having the same problem. So I'm not trying to downplay the fact that people are having issues with their MPC Lives. I just want to add in my experience that it's been super smooth for me the whole time. Okay, so next we're going to take a look at a couple other things that are really neat. Now these aren't really in any particular order, they're just the way I've written them down. So I'm going to go to the channel mixer, and this is something that I was really pleased about. If you take a look at the send section, we have 4 different sends. So each pad can have a send and each program can have a send as well. Now these sends go into an internal returns bus, and that comes back into the mixer. So if we switch over here to the returns, you can see these returns right here. So the sends are auxiliary routings to these channels here, the return channels. And this is where you put your inserts on, so like a compressor or reverb, whatever it might be. The really neat thing here for me though, is the fact that you can actually route these returns out of the MPC Live using the analog outputs. So if we go to route here, see I can take return 1 and send it to 3 and 4, and this one also to 3 and 4, 5 and 6, like so. And if I use these like mono sends, I can actually just pan this one to the left, pan this one to the right. And what I essentially have are 4 auxiliary sends that are going to come out on 4 individual outputs on the back here. So if you think about it, you can use this like a traditional analog mixing desk. If you have a bunch of external effects, you can route them out of the MPC and process them there. Now bringing them back into the MPC is a little bit tricky because you've only actually got 2 inputs. So it's not ideal, but if you're going to use the DAW and an interface as like a tape machine, then it is pretty good because you can route all of these separately through the hardware analog outputs into your DAW. Now the next positive feature for me are the filters. There are so many of them that it's really quite fun to go through this list here and to try out all the different filters. Now, they're not going to be the sort of cutting edge analog emulation that you might find on, say, some of the hot VSTIs that are out right now. But some of them, for example, the model filters, are quite decent in that regard. Now that does not mean that they don't have character, because they do. So for example, we'll go with Model 2, and let's just take a listen. And we'll go with the next model here, Model 3. This is quite a bit quieter. I think this is more of a sort of 303 style roll-in filter. So you can see it does have character. It's fairly digital, but it's also smooth. It's pleasant. What's really cool here is they've given you the old MPC filter from the MPC 3000. This one is awesome. It sounds like it might only be 6 dB or 12, I'm not sure. But I do love the character on this. So there's a lot of other great filters in here too, very useful stuff. There's like phaser style filters. Good band passes. Now I want to add here, just beware that every program you load runs into a filter. And the filters generally, even if you set them to like a minimal setting, like fully open with zero resonance, different filters have different frequency responses to start with, and they will imprint a sound to what you're working on. So if you have every single sample in this going through some kind of filter, it will be affecting the sound in some way. So it's worth checking out how a drum program, for example, sounds with these different filters on versus no filter. And also it's worth knowing that if you go into the preferences here, if you go to project defaults, you can actually set the filter default here. So it can be any one of these filters, or what I recommend is maybe you try it with no filter. Funny enough, one of the most faithful sounding filters is the MPC 3000. So when this is fully open with no resonance, it doesn't alter the sound very much. Okay, so the filters are a huge plus for me. I love the filters on this. The next cool thing is how you can record mutes and solos. You can also record aftertouch, so that's after you've held down the key, you can see the color changing there. So that's while I'm pushing it down, so it's real-time aftertouch recording. It's fantastic. Now there's a neat little feature here which is shortcuts to various areas, so we can look at the pads, programs, your tracks, or your master outputs. I'm going to go into the master outputs for now because I want to show you something that's pretty cool. They've actually given us the MPC 60 and the MPC 3000 kind of emulations that they've done. So if we take a listen to this is with the MPC 60. So those are actually the first MPC 60 and 3000 emulations I've heard that I actually like and would use. Now, these don't have to be on the master outputs. They can be anywhere. They can be on the drum programs, for example, or wherever you want to put them. Now, speaking of effects, let me just explain a little bit the hierarchy or the structure of this. So if we go to the main menu here, you can sort of see the 4 levels. So we've got our levels on the pads here, and then we've got the program, which is what all those pads are part of. This is our drum kit in this example. Then we've got our tracks, and then we've got the outputs. Now, if we go down to the pad level, you can actually assign 4 inserts per pad. You can also assign 4 inserts on the program level, and you can also assign 4 inserts on the master. So that's a lot of mixing power that's at your fingertips. And this includes mixing necessities such as compressors, EQ, high-pass filters, and so on. Another thing I'd like to see is perhaps the ability to save presets. So if you go in and configure something, I'd like the ability to save it and load it again quickly for my other projects. I'm going to demonstrate some of the effects just on this chord sample right here. Then we have the high-pass filter. All's good so far. But I'm going to show you an issue I have, first of all with the delays. So we have some stereo delays here, but we don't have any stereo delays that synchronize. And for example, you can see this delay here is delay sync. Alright, nice. But when we go to delay stereo, we don't have sync anymore. So I'll move the time up here. Alright, so that's not really much use if you want to widen the stereo field. So you go to ping pong. And that's a little bit better, but then again, we don't have synchronization. Now the way around it is you can use 2 mono delays on the sends, one of them pan left, one of them pan right, and set the timings differently. That way you can get synchronized stereo delays. But it's not ideal. Okay, so let's go now to, let's say the chorus. That's pretty metallic. But with a little bit of tweaking, you can actually get it to sound fairly warm, but it's still got that metallic ring to it, and that's the kind of thing that is letting me down with some of these effects, basically. So I think the flanger is pretty good. Then we have the phasers. That's fine as well. The weakest effects, I think, are reverb, which is not really surprising, considering that reverb is typically kind of CPU intensive, so it's an area they might want to sort of skimp on. But these reverbs don't even sound like they're in stereo. They are, but they don't even quite sound like it because, well, I'll just show you. That sounds pretty mono. So you can judge for yourself. Maybe I'm being too harsh here, but I would like a more spacious sounding reverb that actually sounds like it's really in the stereo field and has a smoother ring to it. And also this is pretty big. There's no side chaining, and that is a bit of an issue for me for mixing. I mean, all we really need, or at least all I really need, is like a gain reduction plugin, kind of like Cable Guys or something like that, or the Transfer's LFO tool, something that lets you duck the volume at the kick. And all I really need is that, maybe a couple of shapes to work with, and a mix amount. The nature of touchscreens means sometimes things are going to be a little bit fiddly. That's why I much prefer the encoders, if possible, or shortcuts and things like that. It's also just that I'm kind of old school in that way. I sort of reluctantly accept them today because they offer so much. They really make things accessible. I will say, though, that as far as touchscreens go, I've been really pleased with this one. That's one thing I think could have really ruined the MPC lives, that if the touchscreen was sort of laggy, not very responsive, that really would have been a shame, and it would have been a complete no for me. However, it is pretty good. So you can see there's a little bit of leeway for being imprecise, although you do have to be reasonably close to get it to work. And of course you can just zoom out here and we can make a box over this. And then once you've sort of highlighted some events that you want to work on, you can actually use the encoder. So we can move this around with nudge, edit the start points or the end points like that. And we can also transpose or work on the velocity, which you'll see down here. So as you can see, despite the fact that this is a touchscreen, you know, you're gonna maybe like me have had mixed experiences with them. This is actually really fast. And the fact that you can mix it with the encoder, I think is a great mix. Now the last thing on my positive list is the battery. I would say the battery life has been really good. I've been using this quite a lot. It's not been plugged in and I've had hours and hours of usage out of it. So when they say 4 to 6 hours, maybe a little more, I think that's probably quite accurate. Now, one thing I found that's not so great is if you want to copy your events, you can't really do it from the grid view. At least I haven't found a way, and nobody online that I've seen has found a way to do it, and there's nothing in the manual about it that I found either. So the way you want to copy events in this is to do it the old way you did with the older MPCs. I was kind of stumped for a little while before I remembered this old workflow. So let's say you've created a bar like this, and you want to fill it out so you can start some automation, right? What we need to do is go to the sequence area here and hit double length. And now if we take a look out here, we've got double the length. We've now got 2 bars. And if I do it again, this is a shortcut, by the way. You just double tap this a few times and it'll get you to this home page. So you can see that's pretty fast. I've now got 4 bars of material to work with. So it's really not so bad. And if you want to shorten this again, it's really not so bad to go in here and insert bars, delete bars, erase, and so on, because it gives you the ability to choose what exactly it is you're going to be erasing. And it's pretty detailed. Now, I want to show you something here because you can see we actually have the ability to erase automation. So one of the neat things is you can, for example, go in and automate this filter, for example. So if we take a listen. So automating things is really easy. The thing is though, if you make some kind of mistake or you want to do something a little more detailed, it's pretty tricky because the only option you really have right now is to erase it. There's nowhere to go that I've seen or anybody else has seen to actually edit your automation data. Now on the old AKAI MPCs, you did have a list view that let you go in and sort of take a look at all the events on any particular stage. It looked kind of like this, where you had like step 1, step 2, and you got to look at the automation data. And yeah, it was a little tedious, but at least you could do it, whereas I haven't seen a way so far to view the automation or edit the automation in any way. Now, once you put this into your computer, of course, you can see all that stuff and you can edit it really easily, but I'm talking here standalone mode. And this also becomes a problem when you want to sequence other MIDI gear as well through the MIDI outputs. You can record your automation and you can actually use the Q links to do it. It's actually recorded as MIDI data, you don't use the automation here, but you can do it and it works, but you can't go in and edit it. Okay, so let's talk about some things that you might not be too pleased about in the end. So you only have one filter to work with. These are your modulation sources right here. On the next page, you have an LFO, but this is not free running, so it's always synced to your sample start. So the lack of a free running LFO, you know, because you've got automation, I guess it's not that bad, but it would be nice to have a free running LFO as well as the way it syncs right now. Also, I'm talking about things it doesn't have crossfade, which can be quite important depending on what you're actually working on. So I really hope that's on their list for a future update. There are some cool things here on this page. For example, you can cycle your layers because you can have 4 samples per layer and you can cycle them. So let me just turn these up here. You can also set this to random. So there could be a lot of cool uses for that. Let's go and change this out here. So that's really cool, especially because you can go in here and start to play around with the direction of these as well. And there are just generally a lot of really cool features, like for example, right here on this page we can offset the sample so we can dig further into the start time. But if we move this into the negative range, we actually get a little bit of delay as to when this actually starts. So let's go back to forward, and let's say we want to go here, back to our velocity mode so we play them all at the same time, and I'm just going to turn these down. So let me do this here. See that delay? And that's just really cool. I mean, I'm not 100% sure why I'm going to use that, but in some contexts I might, and because it's there, I'm going to experiment with it. And that's one of the things I love about the MPC, is because some of these things are in there that are just a little odd that I haven't really seen elsewhere, it draws me to want to experiment. And that's really why I got this thing. And a really cool thing here is that you can actually automate this offset as well. So it's pretty awesome. Now speaking of the sampling, there's a really cool mode here. If you actually slice up a sample, you don't actually have to create lots of individual little slices as their own samples. Basically, in the sample edit mode, you can just create a sort of marker set. So for example, let's go by the BPM. This has now created a bunch of markers, and I can send these marker information bits into the program, and then the program merely references these individual markers. So it saves you having to create a bunch of individual little samples, which just clog up your project and make things a little confusing. So I really like that, and it's non-destructive, keeps your original sample in place, but it just makes references. And that's kind of how, as far as I understand, Ableton Live does it as well. Now, let me talk a little bit about the MPC software. This actually loads up either as a standalone application or as a plugin, which you can load into any DAW. This changes everything, because once you plug this into your computer and then load up the plugin, you can edit the automation quite easily, and it also gives you 32 outputs into your DAW. So there's some flexibility there in the way that you can use this and integrate it into your studio. Although I will say, if you can get something to tilt it, that would probably be good as well, because looking right down at a screen like this can actually be pretty bad for your neck, depending on the angle. And I have found myself spending a couple of hours in this getting lost, completely forgetting about my posture, and ending up with a really sore neck. So that brings me to the end of my first impressions video. So I guess I'd say in conclusion that at the moment the MPC Live really feels a lot like the old MPCs. Of course, it has the modern conveniences that the touchscreen affords, and a few new features and tricks as well. These are really welcome. I guess what's different today from when they made their MPCs in the past is you have a lot of Electron users now who are more interested in P-Locks and sound design. And then you've got a lot of Ableton Live users who are looking for some more live clip launching features. I think if you just take a step back from all the things that you might want in a hardware box and just look at what this thing can do already, it's already quite impressive. hope you enjoyed this video. I will be doing a series on this probably at some point for Groove 3, which is where I do my tutorials. And I hope to put out some videos in the future actually producing with the MPC. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.